offensive against Hamas, launching a fury of overnight strikes on the Gaza Strip, the occupied West Bank, and taking aim at Hamas ally Hezbollah in Lebanon. In Gaza alone, the IDF said it hit 320, quote, terror targets overnight, including tunnels and dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad command centers. A spokesperson from the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health says hundreds were killed. A warning now that the video you're about to see is graphic. You see there one of the smallest victims, a toddler, pulled from the rubble in Rafah in southern Gaza. We do not know the condition of that little boy. Also, sources telling CNN the Biden administration has pressed Israel to delay its imminent ground invasion of Gaza to allow for the release of more hostages and to get more aid into Gaza. Jake?
Just a trickle of these critical supplies have come through, 30-some trucks so far. CNN has calculated that Gaza is 7,200 truckloads short of supplies, receiving half of the 1% of the aid it normally received before the Hamas attack on October 7th. Let's turn now to CNN's Jeremy Diamond in Ashkelon, Israel. Jeremy, give us the latest on Israel's plans for the ground incursion into Gaza.
Well, Jake, driving along the Israel's border with the Gaza Strip, it is clear that this is a massive force that is waiting, that is preparing to go into Gaza. In just one area of about a square mile, we saw not just dozens, but hundreds of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and these D9 bulldozers, which are used to tear up any potential IEDs and any other obstacles before a ground force moves in. We saw this force on Saturday, and we saw them today. There has certainly been some movement in the forces, but beyond that, they appear to be just waiting for that command to finally come in order to move forward. And what we are also seeing is the IDF is certainly preparing the ground in Gaza for those forces to move in. They said yesterday that they were going to be intensifying airstrikes in the Gaza Strip, and today we saw evidence of that with the IDF confirming that they hit 320 targets overnight, including Hamas tunnels and operational centers, as well as mortar and missile positions of Hamas militants inside the Gaza Strip. The death toll, of course, of those strikes has also come in. At least 436 people were killed overnight from those strikes, including 182 children, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. All of this, Jake, is coming as we are learning that the United States has asked Israel to delay its invasion of the Gaza Strip in order to allow for more time for these Qatar-led mediation efforts to try and get some of those hostages through. Now, it appears that Israel is perhaps willing to delay that for a few days, but certainly not inevitably. When you listen to Israeli officials, it is clear that they intend to move into the Gaza Strip with a significant ground force. The question at this point, Jake, is when.
All right, Jeremy Diamond, thanks so much. The Israeli military says it now believes 222 people were kidnapped during the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. The family of two American hostages.
This is getting Judith and Natalie back was not the end. It's the beginning. There are so many others. We don't know why them. So it's, for me, lucky and guilty.
Let's bring in CNN national security reporter Natasha Bertrand, who's live for us at the Pentagon. Natasha, what are you hearing about further efforts to free the 222 hostages?
Well, Jake, this is clearly a priority for the White House. President Biden has brought it up in virtually every conversation he has had with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as other world leaders. Last weekend, he held a number of calls with world leaders where these hostages, of course, were discussed, as well as the process of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. But look, it appears, according to our reporting from our colleague Alex Marquardt, that the U.S. has been urging Israel to delay this ground invasion in order to see how these hostage negotiations continue to play out. Qatar has been leading those negotiations with Hamas, and the U.S. believes that following Hamas's decision to release two American hostages last week, there might be some forward momentum in getting the additional hostages released. Clearly a priority for the White House because there are several Americans that are believed right now to be inside Gaza being held hostage by Hamas. Now, pressed on this directly, the National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby, he would not confirm that the U.S. is putting active pressure on Israel to engage in any kind of military strategy one way or another. We should note that the Israelis have also denied that they're feeling any pressure by the Biden administration to delay their incursion. But Kirby did say that the U.S. is in constant contact with the Israelis about their, quote, plans, intentions, and strategy. Here's what he said.
We've been talking to the our Israeli counterparts about their plans, their intentions, their strategy. We've been asking them for how they're answering the tough questions that any military is going to have to do before you go on and conduct major operations, and that's what we're doing now. But obviously, look, the Israeli Defense Forces, they make these decisions for themselves. They have to defend their own people on their sovereign soil, and of course they're going to have to make those decisions.
Now, another aspect of this, Jake, of course, is the humanitarian aid that is flowing very slowly into Gaza. The U.S. wants to see that continue, and the Israelis have been very public about the fact that the U.S. has been exerting a lot of pressure on them to allow medicine, food, and other equipment to flow into the civilians there.
Natasha, tell us about these two drones targeting U.S. forces that were shot down. They were targeting U.S. forces at a base in Syria that were shot down. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Jake, so we just got this information from the Pentagon where two one-way attack drones targeting U.S. forces at a base in Syria, they were shot down on Monday, and this is part of a really broader escalation that the U.S. has seen from these groups, believed to be Iranian proxy groups in the region targeting U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. Now, according to the Pentagon, no U.S. troops were injured in these drone attacks either this week or last week. We saw a number, as many as 4 separate drone attacks on bases, coalition bases, where U.S. troops are stationed in Iraq and Syria. But the U.S. is really concerned about this, and that is why we saw Secretary of Defense Austin order additional air defense capabilities to the region over the weekend to try to protect these troops from these aerial bombardments that appear to be increasing in their frequency against U.S. troops in the region amid this larger backlash to the U.S.'s support for Israel.
All right, Natasha Bertrand at the Pentagon for us. Thanks so much. Let's bring in CNN military analyst and retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. General, sources say the U.S. has been trying to delay this imminent invasion of Gaza by the Israelis. A senior Israeli official is denying that. But beyond the push and pull and the diplomacy, do you think a ground incursion into Gaza by the Israeli military is the right move, is the correct strategy?
Well, Jake, you have to take a look, I think, at all of the strategies of the various actors in this particular circumstance. You have Israel, which has publicly stated their strategy is to destroy Hamas and return hostages. You have Hamas, which has a stated strategy of destroying the state of Israel and killing as many Jews as possible. Then you have the U.S. strategy, which is to deter major actors in the area from escalating into a wider conflict and support its allies Israel and at the same time get hostages. But we're also seeing the potential for an unbelievably large humanitarian disaster in the Gaza Strip. So all of those are competing demands, and it's difficult to achieve all of them. But the conversation about the U.S. persuading Israel to not launch a ground invasion, I think it's moot because of the amount of casualties that Israel suffered at the hands of Hamas on October the 7th. They are not going to ask for a ceasefire. They may attempt to continue to get hostages, but they are going to go in and destroy, they've stated this publicly, the tunnels, the arms, the caches, the intel capabilities of this terrorist organization. It's just, I believe, a matter of time, and it's going to be a large incursion.
Of course, if the leaders of Hamas really cared about the Palestinian people, they could release the hostages and turn themselves into The Hague, I guess, right?
Right. I don't think you're going to see, there may be a few in the eaches of the hostages released, but I don't believe you're going to see a large number released, because that would run counter to what Hamas has done in the past, using both Palestinians and hostages as human shields. That's part of their doctrinal tactics. So it's going to be very challenging, even with another country like Qatar trying to get them to do that, or the UAE or whoever. It's going to be extremely difficult to persuade them to do that.
And what would an Israeli ground incursion mean for those hostages?
Well, when you're talking about the situation, having studied past incursions by the Israelis into Gaza, you're talking about, first of all, having to gather intelligence on an area that you haven't watched closely for years, which is what the Israelis are trying to do now. Plan for large operations in an urban environment that has high-rise buildings, tunnels, narrow streets that are now rubbled, millions of civilians on the battlefield, and people who are caught between the warring parties. These hostages are just part of that, and they are on Hamas's home turf. So it will be very challenging, even for the best of special operators, to find exactly where all 222 of these hostages are and release them, while at the same time trying to conduct an operation which destroys Hamas, which is Israel's stated objective.
And we saw a lot of activity over the weekend. Israel clashing with Lebanon, strikes in Syria, the U.S., Israel, and the West Bank. How concerned are you about this escalating and spiraling into a larger regional war?
Well, I'm very concerned about a large regional war, as I'm sure the Biden administration is too. But also what is concerning is even a state war within the defensive positions of Israel. You've already seen indicators that that's going to happen. You just mentioned the drone attacks on any deterrent forces in both Iraq and Syria that the U.S. has there. There's already been attempts at strikes from Yemen, which were intercepted by the deterrent force of the U.S. Navy. So what you see is the potential for other nations or other terrorist groups to become involved. And this plays into something I've been saying for a long time. A doctrine of Hamas is the victim's doctrine. They will try and use any kind of public action by Israel to blame Israel for deaths and destructions. And of course, Israel is contributing to that, and that's what the administration, the U.S. administration, is concerned about. But with each death, with each airstrike, there are more and more Palestinians and Arab states throughout the area that are saying Israel doesn't have to do that, when in fact they are attempting, just like the Ukrainians, by the way, to defend their territory, to defend their people, and it results in horrific civilian casualties. But this has been the nature of any war between Hamas and Israel over the last 2 decades.
General Mark Ridling, thank you so much. Brianna, back to you.
Right, Jake, thank you. We are following a terrifying story here in the U.S. An off-duty pilot accused of trying to take over an Alaska Airjet in midair, and now he is charged with more than 80 felonies, including attempted murder. Let's bring in CNN aviation correspondent Pete Montine on this. Pete, this happened on Sunday. Tell us what happened here.
Well, we now know the name of the man who tried to cut off the engines of this Alaska Airlines flight, 44-year-old Joseph Emerson of California. We're also hearing from Alaska Airlines that he was an off-duty Alaska Airlines pilot. This flight was going from Painfield in Seattle to San Francisco. That was the plan, but ultimately they had to divert because this off-duty pilot who was sitting in the jump seat, that is the third seat behind the pilot on the left, the first officer on the right, typically used by pilots to commute from one place to another, was trying to tamper with the flight controls. And we have heard from the FAA and the airline here that this pilot essentially tried to cut off the power to this Embraer 175's 2 engines. You can see the flight deck there, pilot on the left, co-pilot on the right, the jump seat just sort of out of view behind those 2 pilots. I want you to listen now to the air traffic control audio of the pilot who was still able to fly the airplane. They were able to subdue this off-duty pilot. And I want you to listen to the calm here as they radio the Seattle Control Center about this problem and say they were going to need to come back into land and they were going to need police help. Listen.
We've got the guy that tried to shut the engines down out of the cockpit, and he doesn't sound like he's caused any issue in the back right now. I think he's subdued. Other than that, yeah, we want law enforcement as soon as we get on the ground and park.
What is not clear right now is the method that this pilot, this off-duty pilot, Emerson, tried to use to cut off the power to these engines. And there's a few different ways to do that. What is clear, though, is that he's facing a huge host of criminal charges. We're talking 83 counts of attempted murder, 83 counts of reckless endangerment, and 1 count of endangering an aircraft. We know the FAA is a part of this investigation, and they just sent out a message to airlines across the U.S. saying this is not in any way connected with world events, although very clearly a serious and scary incident on board this flight. Thankfully, everything turned out okay.
Thank goodness that there were these 2 other pilots there.
Yeah.
Since you don't know what he was attempting to do to try to turn off the engines, do you know if he'd been successful, whether the pilots would have been able to recover the situation?
It sort of depends. So it just depends on the method. But we know from Alaska Airlines, they say that the power was never fully cut off to the 2 engines. So if that does happen, then E-175 like this, or any airplane really, simply turns into a glider. You can only trade airspeed into altitude at that point. And so you're essentially going down. There's no way to climb back up. And so you can only go forward and down. There's no up and back. There's no real turning either. You have to just sort of commit to a point and go for it. So this would have been a really serious thing if they were not able to turn the engines back on. Thankfully, though, the crew was able to catch this, subdue this guy, and get the airplane, essentially just continue the power to the engines and continue to fly.
What an incident. All right, Pete, thank you for the latest on that. 9 new candidates after 20 days, still no Speaker of the House. A shutdown and critical aid to Israel and Ukraine hanging in the balance. We will be live from Capitol Hill. Plus, police in Detroit are searching for a suspect and a motive after a synagogue leader was found stabbed to death outside of her home. We'll have new details ahead on CNN News Central.
When you have auto glass damage, trust SafeLight. My customer really relies on his car's advanced safety system. You right?
Slow down.
So when he got a cracked windshield, he turned to SafeLight. We're the experts at replacing glass and recalibrating your vehicle's camera so automatic emergency braking and lane departure warning work properly to get you back on the road safely.
And that means a lot.
Schedule now.
SafeLight Repair, SafeLight Replace. If you struggle and struggle and struggle with CPAP, you should check out Inspire. No mask, no hose, just sleep. Inspire, sleep apnea innovation. Learn more and view important safety information at inspiresleep.com.
My relationship with my credit cards wasn't good. I got into debt in college, and no matter how much I paid, it followed me everywhere. Between the high interest, the fees, felt trapped. So I broke up with my credit card debt and consolidated it into a low-rate personal loan from SoFi. I finally feel like a grown-up.
Break up with bad credit card debt. Get a personal loan with low fixed rates. Borrow up to $100K and no fees required. Go to SoFi.com to view your rate. SoFi, get your money right.
My active psoriatic arthritis can make me feel like I'm losing my rhythm. With Sky Rizzy to treat my skin and joints, I'm getting into my groove. Along with significantly clearer skin, Sky Rizzy helps me move with less joint pain, stiffness, swelling, and fatigue. And is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses. Sky Rizzy attaches to and reduces a source of excess inflammation that can lead to skin and joint symptoms. With Sky Rizzy, 90% clearer skin and less joint pain are possible.
Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, had a vaccine, or plan to.
Thanks to Sky Rizzy, there's nothing like clearer skin and better movement. And that means everything. Now's the time to ask your doctor about Sky Rizzy. Learn how AbbVie can help you save.
We've got questions about Medicare plans. Well, we've got a lot of answers. How can I help?
Well, for starters, do you have a Medicare plan I can actually afford?
How about a plan with a $0 monthly premium?
Well,
That's a great start. What other benefits can we get? Things like dental, vision, and hearing. But let me help you pick the plan that's right for you.
don't wait. Call 1-888-65-ATNA to get answers to your questions and pick a plan that's right for you. And let's make healthier happen together.
This is your season to smile, to gather together. together and discover the moments that matter, to jump into the fun and join in the celebration. To help get you ready, your Aspen Dental team is celebrating 25 years of affordable care with an epic anniversary savings event. Right now, new patients without insurance get a free full exam and x-rays. Plus, everyone can get 20% off their treatment plan. But hurry, because while the season won't last, the memories you make together will. Aspen Dental. Book today.
Meet the Jennifers. Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. Each planning their future through the Chase mobile app. Gen X is planning a summer in Portugal with some help from JP Morgan Wealth Plan. Let's go, Whiskers. Gen Y is working with a banker to budget for her birthday.
You only turned 30 once.
And Gen Z, her credit's golden. Hello, new apartment. 3 gens getting ahead with Chase. Solutions that grow with you. One bank for now, for later, for life. Chase, make more of what's yours.
It is now day 20 without a Speaker of the House. Right now, 9 Republican candidates are vying for this top job, following failed bids from Congressman Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. This evening, House Republicans will hear pitches from each of those 9 Speaker candidates during yet another closed-door candidate forum. Then tomorrow morning, they will take an internal secret ballot vote with the goal of selecting the party's nominee. The big question here, who can get to 217 votes? Because that, of course, as we all have learned time and again, is what they need to win the gavel. Joining me now, we have 2 former Republican congressmen, Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania and Francis Rooney of Florida for us. Charlie, to you first. You have Tom Emmer. He's the apparent frontrunner here right now. He actually voted to certify the 2020 election, which, might give Democrats and moderate Republicans pause. But does that disqualify him with a significant portion of this Republican conference?
Well, that may disqualify him with some, hardline elements of the conference who believe the election falsely was stolen. But that said, I think the bigger problem for whoever the next Republican speaker is that they will have to turn around and immediately strike a bipartisan deal to keep the government funded. And so in order not to suffer the
Gentlemen, I am
same fate
so sorry to interrupt you. We have John Kirby at the podium at the White House press briefing, and we need to listen in now.
Going forward, it's important that the aid be sustainable, and that's what we're focused on. And of course, throughout the weekend, the president developments, and yesterday, as you know, he convened calls with Prime Minister Netanyahu. All those leaders that they released last night, I won't reiterate it, but you can hopefully take away from that a real clear consistency and unanimity for Israel's right to defend itself against terrorism, while of course adhering to international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians. Now, we've also seen over the course of the last few days, actually the course of the last week, but certainly over the last couple of days of the weekend, an uptick in rocket and drone attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups against military bases housing U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. And we're deeply concerned about the potential for any significant escalation of these attacks in the days ahead. At the direction of President Biden, the Secretary of Defense has ordered the military to take steps both in terms of being able to defend our forces and respond decisively as needed. The Secretary of Defense has directed 2 carrier strike groups to the region, and we are now sending more air defenses to U.S. air bases in the region. Now, we know these groups are supported. We know Iran continues to support Hamas and Hezbollah. And we know that Iran is closely monitoring these events, and in some cases actively facilitating these attacks and spurring on others who may want to exploit the conflict for their own good or for that of Iran. We know Iran's goal is to maintain some level of deniability here, but we're not going to allow them to do that. We also are not going to allow any threat to our interest in the region to go unchallenged. We demonstrated last week that we have and will use the military capables available to us to protect and defend those interests. And those capabilities are getting bigger and better every day. As President Biden has said, our message to any hostile actor seeking to escalate or widen this conflict is very simple. Don't do it. That takes some questions.
John, is it your view that the Israelis should begin their Gaza offensive whenever they feel ready?
It's our view that the Israeli Defense Forces, Steve, need to decide for themselves how they're going to conduct operations. We're not in the business of dictating terms to them, and we're certainly not going to be in the business here from the White House of previewing any future operations one way or the other. That would be inappropriate.
Secondly, you said that Iran is actively facilitating these attacks. What are you seeing? What exactly are they doing?
Oh, their support for these Iran-backed proxies is no secret. It's pretty open, and they've made no secret of it. Funding, resourcing in terms of providing the rockets and the munitions that they fire, training for some of these guys. I mean, there is a connection between these groups and the IRGC, a very direct connection.
Go ahead, MJ.
We have reported that the administration has been urging Israel to delay a ground invasion. Can you tell us whether other countries are making the same request? Is there a coordinated effort on their part?
MJ, I won't speak for other nations and what communications they might be having with Israel. I can tell you, we have since the beginning of the conflict, in the early hours, maintained a level of communication with our Israeli counterparts to ascertain their intentions, their strategy, their aims, to see what their answers are to the kinds of tough questions that any military ought to be asking before you launch any kind of a major operation. Have you thought through the branches? Have you thought through the sequels? Have you thought through the unintended consequences? And so we are in active conversation with them about that.
And we've seen a number of leaders travel to Israel or commit to traveling to Israel, of course the president himself. Is it your understanding that there would not be a ground invasion as long as there's a head of state in the country?
That is a question for Israeli officials to speak to, MJ. Again, I just don't want to be in the position where I am speaking for the Israeli Defense Forces.
And another quick topic. Why is it that people currently are not able to leave Gaza right now? Do you have sort of an explanation as to why that humanitarian corridor for people to exit Gaza, why that isn't open? Is the obstacle Hamas? Is it the Egyptians?
I think there's a lot of factors going into why there's no exit out. We're glad that stuff's going in, as Kareem briefed y'all, but we still want to see safe passage out, and particularly for the several hundred American citizens that we know are in Gaza and want to leave. And Ambassador Satterfield is on the ground working this very, very hard. But there's a number of factors, and I think security, certainly Egyptian officials have spoken to this. I mean, there's they've got legitimate security concerns, and again, we just need to work through that.
Admiral, can you tell us the latest on the status of hostages and the work to try to release additional hostages? Do you see a category of those being held who might be sort of the next available to be released if that were to take place? Can you give us a sense of what that picture looks like?
I wish I could, Kelly. I really do. And these are all great questions, but unfortunately where we are right now in the process makes it impossible for us to publicly detail the efforts that are going on. We are grateful for all the help we got, and we got help getting those two Americans out, the mother and daughter, and we're glad that they're okay and they're going to be reunited with the families and come back home. But there's a bunch of others that aren't. Now, a small group we still think are Americans, and then there are dozens and dozens from other countries, and obviously Israel as well. And there's just a lot of effort going on, a lot of conversations and discussions with partners in the region, and I think it's just best if we don't detail that.
Do we have more specificity on the number of Americans? It's floated from a handful to as many as 10. Anything more on that?
I want to be careful here because the numbers, as you rightly said, have fluctuated since the last time I talked to you. Certainly now we're glad to know that the number's down by 2, obviously. But we still have about 10 unaccounted for Americans, and it's not exactly clear to us where those 10 people are. So I would still categorize it as about a handful. And I know that's not the specificity you want, but that's really as detailed as I think I should get today.
One last issue. There's a dual national from Maryland, young man who went to serve in the IDF, who was killed in action. Can you speak to that situation, if the president has reached the family or has any intention to do that? Any particulars there?
Well, we certainly offer our deepest condolences to the family. That's news no mom and dad ever want to get. I don't have any communication to speak to one way or the other, but again, our thoughts and prayers go to the family, sure.
John, on a post-Hamas Gaza, if that were to happen, is there anything that you can share on what conversations the U.S. is having on what that post-Hamas Gaza would look
really, that's going to be a conversation that Israeli officials, need to start having amongst themselves. And I think, again, without speaking for them, I don't think I'm going too far to say that the focus right now is on going after Hamas, where they are in Gaza, getting humanitarian assistance in, getting people out. That's where our focus is, and I know the focus of our Israeli counterparts is certainly on prosecuting these operations against Hamas. I think the issue of governance in Gaza certainly is not unimportant, but I wouldn't speak for the Israelis in terms of how deeply they're diving down into what that needs to look like.
The U.S. is helping with that conversation.
We have talked to the Israelis again about their aims and strategy, and that includes some of the long-term issues that are out ahead of them. But I think you can understand appropriately right now that the focus is on the operational picture.
On the normalization process, can you say if Saudi Arabia has provided a list of requests for what it would like to see for those talks to start again between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
I'm not tracking or aware of a specific threat. Now, you're talking post-October 7th. I'm not aware of some sort of new list or homework assignment that they've submitted. We still believe that those talks are important. We still want to pursue normalization. We understand that both in Israel and, of course, in Riyadh, there's a different focus right now. We get that. But we still believe there's great value in pursuing normalization, and we have every intention of keeping that going.
Thank you, Admiral. What kinds of humanitarian aid would the U.S. like to see reaching the Palestinians before Israel launches a ground invasion?
Can I bifurcate that question? Because I'm not going to sit here and assume that there's going to be some sort of a ground invasion, and I'm certainly not going to speak to hypothetical timing if there's going to be. Let's just talk about humanitarian assistance writ large. And you heard Karine, we are getting food, water, medicine in to Gaza. Not enough. I mean, there's been, I think, 3 convoys, a little less than 60 trucks. That's a good start, but it is just a start. We want to see it keep going, and I think over the coming days you're going to continue to see convoys of trucks getting in. But it's also, fuel is also an issue. We know you need fuel to run power generators in hospitals. You need fuel to run the pumps in the desalination facilities so that people can drink fresh, healthy water. So fuel is another thing that we're working on.
Whether or not there is a ground invasion, do you view humanitarian aid getting there first as important?
Whether or not there's a ground invasion, we believe that humanitarian assistance flowing to the people of Gaza is critically important, and it needs to go as soon as possible and as much as possible.
And where does the president stand on this? Because there was some confusion over the weekend about whether or not he had said that, yes, he does want Israel to wait until humanitarian assistance can get to the Palestinians before any invasion.
We have been crystal clear with our partners in the region, including Israel, that we want to see humanitarian assistance flow. There's been no change to our posture on that at all. But as I said, I think to Steve's question, we're not dictating military terms to the Israeli Defense Forces. They have a right and a responsibility to go after these terrorists, and they certainly are going to do it in a way that they choose that they believe is appropriate to the threat. We're definitely going to support them in terms of providing the capabilities for them to continue to prosecute Hamas terrorists. In fact, security assistance has continued to flow over the course of the weekend, and it will. But we're not dictating terms to them.
Thank you. So the UN Secretary General, the European Union Foreign Policy Chief, and several international leaders are calling for a humanitarian ceasefire. Will we see the United States calling for a humanitarian pause?
What we want right now is make sure Israel has the tools it needs to defend itself and to go after Hamas, and that humanitarian assistance keeps flowing. Now it's started, and it's a good thing. We want to keep it going and keep it sustainable. That's what we're focused on.
Sorry, you mentioned this joint statement yesterday where President Biden and several Western allies asked Israel to protect civilians. But the death toll in Gaza is rising sharply. Does it look to you that Israel is abiding by international law? Are they listening to your advice?
We're not going to parcel out each and every event that happens on the battlefield, especially since we're not there. I can just tell you that there hasn't been a conversation that we've had with Israeli counterparts, and we've had them at all levels, where we aren't talking about not just what they want to do, but how they want to do it.
John, 2 Fridays ago, I reported that the U.S. was urging Israel to delay a ground invasion. A day after, the officials here issued statements to other outlets denying that was the case. In the days, week plus since, other outlets have started to report the same information that I had, but today you're not confirming any of those reports. My question is, aren't you at all concerned that if the U.S. is not clear with the public about what we are asking or suggesting to Israel that they do here, that that's going to complicate getting this aid package through Congress? I mean, you guys are asking for more than $105 billion, which a portion of this goes toward Israel. Are you concerned that not being clear with folks about what the U.S. is advising Israel to do will hamper support in Congress for this aid?
We've been very clear and consistent about our support for Israel and their ability to defend themselves. Jackie, we've been very clear and consistent about the fact that we're going to keep providing security assistance so that they can do that. We've been clear and consistent about the need for humanitarian assistance to flow, and clear and consistent about our desire to get people out of Gaza as well as to get our hostages home. I think we've been very clear and consistent throughout, and that includes with members of Congress. And yes, we are going to need congressional support to continue to support Israel. We've got enough appropriations available to us for a while longer. Well, how long is that while is going to depend on the expenditure rate and the kinds of operations that they're conducting. So we desperately need Congress to act on the supplemental request.
Well, you've been asking tough questions of the Israelis about their strategy here. Are you liking the answers that they're giving you?
No, I'm not going to talk about the details of the conversations that we're having. Again, these have been clear and consistent conversations. Again, making sure that they have what they need, and that they are thinking through, that we are asking them what their answers are to the kinds of questions that any military ought to be asking itself as it conducts operations.
But on the aid portion, how, for instance, are you going to convince people that this is not going to get into Hamas's hands? When, for instance, we saw fraud with something like COVID relief money in the U.S. And we're now talking about securing an understanding with Hamas, a terror group, about how this humanitarian aid should be used. I mean, how can you convince people that that is going to be a worthwhile, necessary, and secure endeavor?
We certainly share concerns about any diversion of humanitarian assistance for Hamas purposes. I mean, for instance, fuel's a good example. We know that they need fuel to be able to electrify and power up their tunnels, for instance. Keep the lights on. So we understand that. We're not blind to the potential concerns here over diversion, which is why Ambassador Satterfield is on the ground. His whole purpose is to make sure that humanitarian assistance can get to the Palestinian people. We have seen no indications as of today that any of the trucks that Kareem talked about, any of the material in those trucks, have been diverted to Hamas or been absconded by Hamas. That, in fact, every indication that we have is that it has, in fact, gone to the Palestinian people who are in desperate need for it. I would remind folks that we have trusted partners on the ground, humanitarian aid organizations, and of course the UN Relief Agency is on the ground, and they very much are taking a personal stake, a professional personal stake, in making sure that aid is getting where it's needed. We're going to watch it. Obviously, we're going to watch this closely. We don't want to see Hamas benefit any more than anybody else does.
Just following on that, how does the U.S. go about knowing that it is getting to who it's supposed to, aid is getting to who it's supposed to get to, and not Hamas isn't taking a bit off the top? And then second, could you confirm that the president has sent Lieutenant General James Flynn and some other folks to advise the Israelis?
So on your first question, Amr, in fact, I'm going to write these down because I'm going to probably forget it. But on your first question, as I said, we're working with trusted partners on the ground, including the UN. And that's the way we do it in so many countries around the world, where we don't have a footprint, we don't have or any regions of the world, where we don't have a footprint. I mean, we're not on the ground to personally inspect these things, but we do have trusted partners on the ground, including the UN and some of these aid organizations, who will report what they're seeing and where they're taking this material and who's getting it. So we'll stay in close touch with them, and we all share the same desire. that Hamas not be able to divert any of this stuff for their own purposes. We all share that desire. And it's not just the United States. You said, how's the United States going to monitor? The whole international community has a stake here in making sure that the people of Gaza get this food, water, medicine, and other vital needs met. On your second question, what I can tell you is that that there are a few relevant military officers with experience, the kinds of experience that we believe is appropriate to the sorts of operations that Israel is conducting and may conduct in the future, to go over there to share some perspectives from their own experience and to ask the hard questions, the same hard questions that we've been asking of our Israeli counterparts since the beginning.
How many?
A few.
Thank you, Admiral. Israel has repeatedly said that its top priority is destroying Hamas. So what is America's top priority, and are the two countries on the same page here?
America's top priority, I think President Biden made that clear when we were over there, is to make sure that Israel has the tools and the capacity and the capabilities to go after Hamas terrorists, and to make sure humanitarian assistance flows in, and to make sure we can get innocent civilians who want to leave Gaza out, including American citizens.
If Israel does begin this ground invasion, could you just outline how this would complicate getting the remaining hostages out and how it would impact America's strategy?
Again, I just don't think it's wise for me to get up here and do a bunch of speculating and hypothesizing about operations that haven't happened yet. We'll let the Israelis speak for themselves and for what operations they're going to conduct. All I can tell you is we're going to make sure that they have what they need to do it, and that the humanitarian assistance keeps flowing.
Are there any differences? Because you outlined 3 top priorities for America, and Israel has repeatedly said the top priority is destroying Hamas. So how can you achieve all of the priorities from America at the same time Israel gets their top priority?
We agree that the top priority has got to be going after Hamas. There's no daylight here. We also think it's important for humanitarian assistance to flow and for our hostages to get home with their families, and we're working all 3 of those things.
Way in the back.
Thank you. Have you been tracking new reporting coming out that Hamas and the Red Cross are working together to exchange another 50 Israeli and dual citizenship hostages? Is there anything you can say about that?
No, I cannot.
And then another question on Iran. Some officials have expressed concern over escalation, particularly with Iran, and Iran's foreign minister warned, quote, anything would be possible at any moment and the region will get out of control. So have you seen any indication that Iran is preparing to further expand this conflict more so than what we've already seen?
I touched a little bit on that in my opening statement. We know that they're supporting these groups. We know they've supported Hamas and Hezbollah. We know they're monitoring these events very, very closely, and in some cases urging on some of these groups. And that's why I made it clear the president does not want to see this conflict widen. We have added additional military capability into the region to deter any such action, and we will act appropriately to protect and defend our national security interests in the region. You saw that just last week when a guided missile destroyer shot down missiles and drones that were potentially on their way into Israel. We take those responsibilities seriously, and anybody else in the region ought to be paying attention to that.
Thank you, Aaron. John, do you have an update on whether Iran was directly involved in the October 7th attack on Israel? So some Israeli officials say that they have evidence, but they have not presented any yet.
Yeah, I would say we're in the same place we were. We know there's complicity here by Iran. As I just said, they have been supporting Hamas for years, a couple of decades, and Hamas wouldn't be able to function or exist without Iran.
John Kirby there at the White House, opening his remarks at the briefing there with a message to what he described as hostile actors seeking to escalate or widen this conflict. He said, don't do it. And amid reports that the U.S. is asking Israel to delay its ground incursion, its ground invasion into Gaza, he said that the IDF, the Israeli forces, are capable of making this decision themselves. Obviously sensitive, as is Israel, and the U.S. here sensitive to the appearance that the U.S. is pushing Israel around, especially after we heard President Biden, when he was asked about whether they should delay this ground invasion until more hostages can get out, he said yes on Friday. And then also blaming Iran for this increase in attacks that we have seen on U.S. targets, U.S. personnel included, in Iraq and Syria, saying that they are trying to have some air of deniability, but that the U.S. isn't going to allow them to have that. He said that humanitarian aid into Gaza needs to be flowing in soon, he said, and as much as possible, but then also the caveat saying that the Egyptians have legitimate security concerns. And he also said that there are still 10 unaccounted for Americans in this Israel-Gaza conflict, that at this point in time, American officials do not know where they are 10 Americans unaccounted for. We'll continue to monitor this. If there is any more news made, we'll bring that to you. Stay with CNN. We'll be right back.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines. The day's biggest stories. The night's most essential reporting. This is the new CNN Prime Time. Weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
Create a backyard that's out of this world. Right now, save $30 on the GTA 26 handheld battery pruner. Real steel. Find yours.
RSV is out there. For those 60 years and older, protect against RSV with Arexvy. Arexvy is a vaccine used to prevent lower respiratory disease from RSV in people 60 years and older. Arexvy does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients. Those with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. The most common side effects are injection site pain, fatigue, muscle pain, headache, and joint pain.
I chose Arexvy.
RSV? Make it Arexvy.
JP Morgan Wealth Management knows it's easy to get lost in investment research. Get help with JP Morgan Personal Advisors.
Hey David, ready to get started?
Work with advisors who create a plan with you and help you find the right investments.
So great getting to know you. Let's take a look at your new investment plan.
Okay, great.
This should have you moving in the right direction.
Thanks, Jen.
Get ongoing advice and manage your investments in the Chase mobile app.
My A1C was up here. Now it's down with Rebelsis.
His A1C?
It's down with Rebelsis.
My doctor told me Rebelsis lowered A1C better than a leading branded pill.
And that people taking Rebelsis lost more weight. I got to my A1C goal and lost some weight too.
Rebelsis isn't for people with type 1 diabetes. Don't take Rebelsis if you or your family ever had medullary thyroid cancer or have multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2 or if allergic to it. Stop Rebelsis and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, or an allergic reaction. Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Gallbladder problems may occur. Tell your provider about vision problems or changes. Taking Rebelsis with a sulfonylurea or insulin increases low blood sugar risk. Side effects like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea may lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
Need to get your A1C down?
You may pay as little as $10 per prescription.
And Doug. And Doug says you can customize and save hundreds on car insurance with Liberty Mutual. He hits his mark center stage and is crushed by a baby grand piano.
Are you replacing me?
With this guy?
Customize and save with Liberty Bibbity.
He doesn't even have a mustache.
Oh, look, a boo-boo.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Network of licensed insurance agents can help you enroll in the way that works best for you, online, in person, or over the phone. Plan Enroll is a free service that has helped millions of Americans. You're never obligated to join a plan, so don't wait. Call for your free Medicare coverage review today and see how the licensed insurance agents at Plan Enroll can help you find a plan that's right for you. Feel confident in your Medicare choices. Call Plan Enroll today.
I'm Natasha Chen in Los Angeles, and this is CNN.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Christian Faith Publishing. Write for a higher purpose. Publish with us.
Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-455-1827.
New reports today about Donald Trump's handling of potentially sensitive national security information while he was president. According to the New York Times and 60 Minutes Australia, Trump allegedly shared information about his calls with the leaders of Ukraine and Iraq with Australian billionaire Anthony Pratt, who is a member at Mar-a-Lago. Pratt, also a key prosecution witness in Trump's classified documents case, and gave an interview to special counsel Jack Smith. CNN's affiliate in Australia, 9 News, obtained what they say are secret recordings of Pratt talking about Donald Trump. Here's what he said about a conversation that Trump had with Iraq's president.
I hadn't even heard it. It hadn't even been on the news yet. He said, I just bombed Iraq today. And the president of Iraq called me up and said, you just leveled my city. And he said, and I said to him, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Bradley Moss is with us now. He is a national security attorney. All right, Bradley, what is your reaction to hearing this? I mean, how much of this is hyperbole? How much of this could Trump be in legal jeopardy because of?
Sure, Brianna. So most of it, he's not actually in legal jeopardy in terms of what he did while president. He had pretty much unfettered legal discretion to share classified information with anyone he wanted while he was president. But what has come out of this reporting, both at CNN and at other outlets, is what he told to this gentleman from down under after he left the presidency, that he was discussing information he had learned about our U.S. nuclear submarines. That could put him in some trouble. I don't expect a superseding indictment or anything along those lines because it's too vague. There's too many, areas of, wiggle room for him to eventually get out of it. But I do expect to be part of the factual presentation, that Jack Smith's team will show how Donald Trump continued to be reckless with respect to safeguarding classified information after leaving office, and that'll speak to the larger picture.
He also recalled Trump sharing information about his infamous call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where, of course, Trump was heard pressuring Zelensky to launch unfounded corruption probes into Joe Biden. Let's listen to what was said there.
Trump said, that Ukraine phone call, that was nothing compared to what I usually do. And he said, that Ukraine phone call, that's nothing compared to what we usually talk about.
What is your reaction to that, particularly this idea of, by then Trump obviously knew there was a problem, that was not a perfect phone call, and clearly there was no learning curve on that.
Yeah, that's just vindication for the original whistleblower who came forward to report the concerns about this to the intelligence committees and to Congress and the OIG. It's vindication of those who sought to hold former President Trump accountable through that first impeachment process, including soon-to-be former Senator Romney, who voted to convict in the Senate. It shows just how much Trump knew what he was doing was not permissible, how much he abused the political process for his own personal political gain in violation of what other would have been U.S. criminal provisions.
So as I mentioned, Pratt is a key prosecution witness in Trump's classified documents case. You mentioned, obviously, the stuff that is really putting Trump in jeopardy has to do with after his presidency. When you look at the case right now, just the documents case, the federal case, how much hot water is Trump in at this point?
Yeah, if the Mar-a-Lago case down in Florida gets to trial, it is almost certain Donald Trump will get convicted. I don't care where that jury's from. I don't care if it's Fort Pierce, Florida. I don't care how conservative it is. He'll be most likely convicted. The key for him is these pretrial motions and the delays he's trying to push on Judge Ken out there, try to delay this thing, not make sure it doesn't get to trial before the election, because if he wins re-election, he can get the case thrown out. But if this makes it to trial before the election, my money is very much on Jack Smith and a conviction.
All right, Bradley Moss, really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Still ahead, the White House says that Iran is actively facilitating attacks against military bases that house U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. We're going to have much more on this during our special live coverage. We'll be right back.
Hockey season begins with celebration. Time to celebrate again. The
Chase Ink Business Premier Card is made for people like Sam who make
everyday products designed smarter.
Like a smart coffee grinder.
That orders fresh beans for you.
Oh, genius. For more breakthroughs like that,
I need a breakthrough card.
like ours, with 2.5% cash back on purchases of $5,000 or more.
Plus unlimited 2% cash back on all other purchases.
And with greater spending potential, Sam can keep making smart
A
ideas.
brilliant reality.
The Ink Business Premier Card from Chase for Business. Make more of what's yours.
We've got questions about Medicare plans.
Well, we've got a lot of answers. How can I help?
Well, for starters, do you have a Medicare plan I can actually afford?
How about a plan with a $0 monthly premium?
Well, that's a great start. What other benefits can we get?
Things like dental, vision, and hearing. But let me help you pick the plan that's right for you.
Ooh.
Don't wait. Call 1-888-65-Aetna to get answers to your questions and pick a plan that's right for you. And let's make healthier happen together.
Hey, grab more delectables. You know, that lickable cat treat.
Delickable delectables.
Yes. Just hurry.
Must be delicious.
Delectables, lickable treat.
Deliciously delectable delectables.
Sometimes the lows of bipolar depression feel darkest before dawn. With Caplyta, there's a chance to let in the light. Caplyta is proven to deliver significant relief across bipolar depression. Unlike some medicines that only treat bipolar 1, Caplyta treats both bipolar 1 and 2 depression, and in clinical trials, movement disorders and weight gain were not common.
Call your doctor about sudden mood changes, behaviors, or suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants may increase these risks in young adults. Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke. Report fever, confusion, stiff, or uncontrollable muscle movements, which may be life-threatening or permanent. These aren't all the serious side effects.
Caplyta can help you let in the light. Ask your doctor about Caplyta. Find savings and support at caplyta.com.
It was deep into the winter freeze when Ryan and Brenda Brinker made a pact. We will no longer be prisoners to you, Wisconsin winter. We shall fly south to where the courts are eternally bright, and we will do so with a new phone plan, one with the same coverage, up to half the cost. They may call us snowbirds,
But we're phoenixes.
when freedom calls, we're here to answer.
I've never been healthier.
Shingles doesn't care, but Shingrix protects. Proven over 90% effective, Shingrix is a vaccine used to prevent shingles in adults 50 years and older. Shingrix does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients or to a previous dose. An increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome was observed after getting Shingrix. Fainting can also happen. The most common side effects are pain, redness and swelling at the injection site, muscle pain, tiredness, headache, shivering, fever, and upset stomach. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Shingrix today.
Don't let a clogged gutter rain on your parade. Protect your home with LeafGuard, the only one-piece seamless gutter system guaranteed to never clog, no matter the weather. Never clean your gutters again with LeafGuard. LeafGuard's patented seamless design keeps leaves, pests, and sediment out while directing water away from your home, preventing wood rot and foundation decay, giving you peace of mind that your home and family are protected from water damage with the industry's premier maintenance-free gutter system. LeafGuard is the smartest solution in gutter protection, proudly protecting your home by getting it right the first time for a lifetime. From manufacturing to installation, LeafGuard handles the entire process from start to finish. Invest in your home with a company you can trust. Call 888-6LeafGuard right now for a free estimate and save 20% plus $500 off your purchase and installation. LeafGuard, get it today, protected for life.
I'm MJ Lee at the White House, and this is CNN.
Hello, I'm Brianna Keeler in Washington with Anderson Cooper in Tel Aviv. And this just in, Israel's defense minister says it's preparing for a, quote, multilateral operation on Hamas from the sea, ground, and air. And this comes as Israel ramped up its attacks on Gaza overnight, launching a barrage of airstrikes. You're looking now at some of the aftermath here. The Israeli military saying it hit hundreds of terror targets. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 436 people were killed in the strikes overnight, including nearly 200 children. Anderson?
Well, this all comes as we are learning the U.S. is pushing Israel to delay its ground invasion of Gaza in hopes of getting hostages out and much-needed humanitarian aid to the south. although an Israeli official has denied this. Today, a third group of trucks carrying supplies entered a key border crossing linking Egypt and Gaza, but relief groups are warning much more is needed as the crisis there deepens for the many Palestinians who are running out of food and water. CNN's Chief National Security Correspondent Alex Marquardt live for us in Washington right now. Also, CNN's correspondent Jeremy Diamond is in Ashkelon, Israel, right along the border. Jeremy, let's start with you. What are you hearing, seeing about possible incursion on the ground in Gaza?
Well, Anderson, it really is about the combination between what we are seeing on the ground, what we are hearing from officials, and also, frankly, hearing this evening as we listen to the Gaza Strip behind us. We have been hearing the steady thud of Israeli artillery and airstrikes all throughout the evening. But last night was certainly one of the most significant strikes that the Israeli military carried out on the Gaza Strip, hitting more than 320 targets, targeting Hamas tunnels, operational command centers, as well as missile and mortar launch points. But this evening, the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant is making very clear that this operation, even though it has not begun yet, despite some anticipation in a sense that it is certainly an imminent operation, making clear that it will begin. And he is describing it as a multilateral operation that he says will be carried out from the air, ground, and sea. As he was visiting the Ashdod Navy base, Gallant told the soldiers there to keep preparing, and he said that the operation, quote, will come soon. As we drove around the Gaza Strip today, Anderson, it's very clear that the troops that are here and the tanks, the armored personnel carriers, of which we saw hundreds, frankly, in just an area that was about a square mile, these troops are all very clearly ready to move in. We saw them milling about, but they have everything that they need to move forward. The question now is exactly when that command will come through.
And Alex, the White House says that Iran is, in their words, actively facilitating attacks against military bases which house U.S. personnel in Iraq as well as Syria. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Anderson, obviously there's widespread concern that Iran could direct its proxies to significantly escalate their attacks against not just Israel but American assets. That would include Hezbollah, for example, to the north of Israel in Lebanon. But we also have seen a fairly serious uptick in the number of these types of attacks. Just today, Anderson, there was a drone attack against a U.S. base in Syria. There were two drones that were sent to that base. They were taken down. On Friday, we saw a missile attack directed at a U.S. diplomatic facility in Baghdad. A U.S. destroyer in the Red Sea had to take down missiles and drones that were fired by Iran-backed Houthi rebels off the coast of Yemen last week. So there is major concern and evidence that these attacks are growing, and there's the potential, according to the White House's John Kirby, of serious escalation. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say just moments ago.
And we know these groups are supported by the IRGC and the regime. We know Iran continues to support Hamas and Hezbollah. And we know that Iran is closely monitoring these events and in some cases actively facilitating these attacks and spurring on others who may want to exploit the conflict for their own good or for that of Iran. We know Iran's goal is to maintain some level of deniability here, but we're not going to allow them to do that.
Anderson, to that point about deniability, there still hasn't been any direct link established between Iran and the attack that we saw by Hamas on October 7th. Though there's no question that, as many officials have said, Hamas could not have carried out that attack without the years and years and millions of dollars of Iran's backing. Anderson.
And Alex, what is the Pentagon said about possibly sending more assets to this region?
Yeah, they're not just issuing warnings, they're actually moving military assets. We had already seen those two carrier strike groups move into the Eastern Mediterranean, the Ford and the Eisenhower. We're told by the Pentagon over the weekend that a number of troops are being put in a higher state of readiness in case they need to be sent. And then perhaps most dramatically, Anderson, because of all the potential for attacks against U.S. troops around the region, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says that air defense systems, including Patriot missile batteries, are going to also be moving into the Middle East. So they are certainly preparing for the worst, Anderson.
All right, Alex Marquardt, Jeremy Diamond, thank you. Joining me now, talk more about what we may see on the ground in Gaza once Israeli forces move in is retired Army Colonel Peter Mansour. He served as executive officer to General David Petraeus during the Iraq War. He's now a professor professor of military history at Ohio State University. Colonel, thank you so much for being with us. We have seen, there have been people talking about an imminent ground operation for more than 2 weeks now. Sources say the Biden administration is seeking a hold off of that. For Israel's military, what is the calculus? What are they waiting for if it's not a political decision?
I swear to God, I swear. Well, think back to the Gulf War of 1991 when the United States had several weeks of air preparation of the battlefield to whittle down the Republican Guard before it went in with ground troops. And once it did, it was a 100-hour war. What the Israelis are doing now are shaping the battlefield. They're trying to reduce Hamas's military capabilities, strike their rocket facilities, strike their tunnels, and shape the battlefield so that when the ground troops do go in, they don't take as many casualties, and the ground is prepared for their invasion. I don't think this is going to last very long because Israel is under international pressure to reduce the deaths of non-combatants. So I think the ground invasion will begin in a matter of days, but not until the Israelis are convinced that their air power has done the job and prepared the way for the ground troops.
When you say you don't think this is going to last very long, do you mean this pause of going in, or that the actual operation on the ground? Because obviously it's hard to tell how long it may. Do you think it was going to be short, or are you talking weeks and months for a ground operation?
Yeah, I was referring to the airstrikes. So there's going to be not many more days, I think, of these airstrikes before we see a ground invasion. Now, the ground invasion itself is going to be lengthy. If they're going to try to destroy Hamas, that's a tall order. They're going to have to go through all of Gaza, destroy the tunnels, get rid of their military capabilities building by building, and that's going to take weeks, if not months.
Let's talk about that. Given experiences the U.S. has had in Fallujah, in Mosul, the operations to finally get rid of ISIS in Mosul, how difficult is this going to be, and what are the rules of engagement? I've talked to some Israeli officers about this, because there's a lot of people who have gone south, as Israel urged, but there's an awful lot of people who have stayed in Gaza City. What happens to them?
This is going to be more difficult than either Fallujah or Mosul. In those instances, the United States had pretty much control of the skies, and they could bomb to their heart's content because the civilians had fled Fallujah. And in Mosul, the ISIS was confined to the inner city, and so we could bomb the buildings and destroy them. Here in Gaza, as you noted, the civilians have not all fled, and the Israelis will be expected to abide by the laws of land warfare, which admittedly allow for civilian casualties, but the number of civilian casualties have to be commensurate with the military advantage gained by their destruction. And this is going to be, a battle in the court of world opinion as Israel goes in with these ground forces, and Palestinian civilians start taking the brunt of the military operations.
That's interesting that's sort of the calculation, if that's the awful right word to use, which is shooting or killing a certain civilian if they are in the line of fire of somebody else who has a military value in killing them. I mean, who makes these are calculations being made by soldiers in the field in the heat of battle, correct?
No, they have to be made really at the very top to begin with. I'm reminded of the Allied airstrikes against French cities to reduce the rail network prior to the Battle for Normandy. It killed over 30,000 French civilians, and they asked de Gaulle, can we do this? And he said, if that's what it takes to liberate France, the French people will pay the price. And this is sort of the calculation that's being made now at the highest levels of the Israeli government. How many people do we have to kill in our quest to destroy Hamas? And, it's a bloody calculation, but that's war.
It is remarkable to think, you're a historian of military history, and which is why it's so great to talk to you, but those sorts of calculations could be made, or those sorts of decisions could be made by de Gaulle in the 40s, there wasn't social media, there wasn't people with cameras on the ground documenting what that actually looked like. It would be very interesting to see how history might be different if there had been.
And exactly. So every decision is going to be scrutinized more today, which is why you need to make sure that your cause is just and that your goal is achievable, which in this case I'm not sure it is. It's going to be very difficult to weed out the Hamas militants from the civilian population. It's going to be a very messy battlefield. And I think Israel needs to think hard about the long-term political settlement here and not just try to exact revenge for the horrific terror attacks that they suffered a couple weeks ago.
Well, just finally, I talked to, I guess your old boss, David Petraeus, a couple days ago, and that's one of the things he was really stressing, which is, what is the plan for victory? I mean, it's one thing, you know, you understand the military assault, whether you agree with it or not, but what do you do if you actually succeed in eliminating Hamas, or whatever that means, and not have a situation like we saw in Iraq, where you had a de-Baathification campaign, and then you had all these former members of the Ba'ath Party who had military training, who then took part in the insurgency?
Well, exactly. I'm reminded of a George W. Bush cabinet meeting before the invasion of Afghanistan, and he was briefed on the war plan, and then after the meeting was concluded, he said, "So who's going to govern Afghanistan when we win?" And he got a lot of blank stares across from him from the table. And this is the kind of question that the Israeli government needs to be dealing with now. How is Gaza governed going forward, even if you succeed? Because that question cannot wait for the day of victory.
Colonel Peter Mansour, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back in the U.S., chaos continues on Capitol Hill. The House remains frozen with no speaker, paralyzing the president's emergency aid requests for Israel as well as Ukraine. We'll have a live report from the Hill next.
Pro-level performance at work and at home. Right now, save $30 on the BG56 CE blower. Real steel. Find yours.
The day you get your Clear Choice dental implants changes your struggle with missing teeth forever. It changes how you eat, how you feel, and how you enjoy life. It changes your smile, and how others smile at you. Clear Choice Network doctors have changed over 100,000 lives with dental implants, and they can change yours too. Because a Clear Choice day changes every day. Schedule a free consultation.
At Consumer Cellular, we offer amazing 5G coverage, backed up by incredible customer service. But that wouldn't mean much without super low prices. You already know we're up to half as much as the largest carriers. But guess what? AARP members can save even more. Yahoo!
Switch to Consumer Cellular now and get unlimited talk and text with a flexible data plan starting at only $20 a month.
If you struggle and struggle and struggle with CPAP, you should check out Inspire. No mask, no hose, just sleep. Learn more and view important safety information at InspireSleep.com.
Only United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plans come with a U-Card, one simple member card that opens doors for what matters.
What if we need to see a doctor away from home?
We got you. With Medicare Advantage's largest national provider network, only from United Healthcare.
Liberty Mutual customized my car insurance, and I saved hundreds. With the money I saved, I started a dog walking business. I was a bit nervous at first, but then I figured, it's just walking, right? Oh! No, it's just funny! Calm down, Taco. That just sucks. Walter, don't! No, you're lucky you're so cute. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
My dry eyes made me a burning, stinging 5 times a day.
Makeup smearing, jock Caesar.
I want another option. That's not another drop.
Tyrvaya, it's not another drop.
It's the first and only nasal spray for dry eye. Tyrvaya treats the signs and symptoms of dry eye disease fast by helping your body produce its own real tears. Common side effects include sneezing, cough, and throat and nose irritation.
Relying only on drops? Not me. My own real tears are my relief.
Ask your eye doctor about Tyrvaya.
The Chase Ink Business Premier Card is made for people like Sam who make
everyday products designed smarter. Like a smart coffee grinder that orders fresh beans for you.
Oh, genius. For more breakthroughs like that,
I need a breakthrough card.
Like ours, with 2.5% cash back on purchases of $5,000 or more.
Plus unlimited 2% cash back on all other purchases.
And with greater spending potential, Sam can keep making smart ideas.
A brilliant reality.
The Ink Business Premier Card from Chase for Business. Make more with yours.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
We only represent mesothelioma victims and their families. Call for a free book.
Call 800-282-4444 or go to Mesobook.com.
Just hours from now, House Republicans will try to pick a new speaker yet again. These 9 GOP lawmakers are in the running after 20 days with no speaker of the House and failed bids from GOP Congressman Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. We're covering the chaos from all angles. We have CNN Chief Congressional Correspondent Mani Raju up on Capitol Hill with what to expect today, and we have CNN Senior Data Reporter Harry Enton here with details on the political fallout. First to Manu, tell us what you're hearing from lawmakers.
Well, we are expecting a contested race for the speakership. There are 9 candidates who are running for this, trying to get a majority of the conference vote tomorrow to be nominated as speaker. The challenge will be which one of them gets nominated can get the 217 votes they need on the House floor to be elected, something that has not happened yet in the almost 3 weeks since Kevin McCarthy's ouster. I am here with one of those candidates, Kevin Hern of Oklahoma, who's the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. Congressman, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. You've been on the phone all weekend long trying to get the votes from your colleagues. What specifically is the pitch you're making, and how do you distinguish yourself from some of the members here in this race?
Well, certainly everybody is going to tell all the members that they believe they're the candidate can reunite the party and bring us together. The question will be is how each of us present our experiences to make that happen. I chair the Republican Study Committee, and it's made up of the House Freedom Caucus, the Problem Solvers, Main Street, and Republican Governance. And what that is, that's all the caucuses of the Republican Party. And so we already work on a weekly basis with 80% of the entire conference, which makes it a natural that we are already uniting, working on policy that matters to everybody in the entire conference.
But this is a badly divided Republican conference. We've been hearing this for some time, and there's so much anger and ill will towards the people who started this, including those 8 Republicans who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy. Should anything happen to those 8 members?
Well, again, I'm not going to look backwards. I'm going to look forward. So we spent all of our time working what happened in the past. We're never going to be able to move forward. The American people right now know that we have a real problem in the world in Israel. What's going on over there is an atrocity. It's sad. It's really scary, quite frankly, what could happen to the rest of the world if we don't get ahead of this. We need to get back in power, get the resolution passed for Israel, condemn Hamas as terrorists, what they're doing right now, shore up our defense so the rest of the world knows that we're serious about protecting the sovereignty of our allies and our friends and our own nation. And that's what we're going to do. And when you look at what's broken right now, it's to trust in each other. And we restore that. And the way you do that is you listen and you listen and you listen, and you put policy together to reunite the party.
You mentioned Israel, but one of the big things you have to deal with was deciding how to move on Israel aid and Ukraine aid if you're Speaker of the House. Will you listen to what the President is calling for and what Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is calling for to tie Israel aid to Ukraine aid and pass it together?
We certainly know in the House, and I would argue in the entire Congress, Ukraine aid is controversial at times, and really we just want to know where the money is going to be spent and what the strategy is, the mission is with the money. We do not need to bog down Israel aid in that debate right now. There's still $9 billion in aid for Ukraine sitting out there. We need to get Israel passed now, the Israel funding passed right now, as soon as we get the Speaker back in the House, hopefully tomorrow night. We get that done, and that way we send the message. We can have the debate on Ukraine. We can invite the President, State Department, and others to come and talk to us about the mission. And I think that will solve and cool a lot of the negative aspects of the Ukraine funding so we can get moved down the road.
You also voted against a short-term spending bill to keep the government open just a few weeks ago. Would you be open to passing a short-term spending bill to avoid a shutdown in mid-November?
If we do our work, which is the day before I supported the CR that cut spending, and it also funded the southern border. I thought we gave away too much to the Senate, to the Chuck Schumer in the Senate. We just did that, kind of carte blanche.
I think what we got to do is we got to work. We got to take back days that have been off. We got to schedule enough days here to get our work done. Put the DOD bill on the floor, get it passed. As I said, the other three that we passed, get those done, get them passed, get them signed into law. Work our tails off to get to the end of the November.
But not a short-term bill, because that's where you're going to end up having a meeting, right?
But we'll have about 25% of the funding left to do it. If we do it, take Speaker McCarthy's plan actually and put that in place, we will be where we need it. If it's November 17th to have 25% of the funding, that we will CR to get to where we need to be.
So from what I understand, former President Trump has spoken to some of the candidates who are running. Have you spoken to him since you announced?
I have.
What was that conversation like?
Well, he just wanted to know what was going on in the race. Obviously, 9 people get in the race. He knew some of us at different degrees and levels. I've worked with the president, for years since I've been in Congress because he's been to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a state that voted all 77 counties for him twice. And so, obviously, we're very rich. We're the only state that did that, by the way. And so, he's very familiar with Oklahoma and the members of the delegation there.
Did you ask for his support?
I did not. I'll let the president. I think he's going to set this one out.
You don't think he's going to endorse anybody?
I don't, because all of us are friends of his. He supported Jim because Jim was a longtime friend, a fighter for him early on, what he's been doing in the judiciary. But if you notice that supported Jim, he said, I also like Steve Scalise and I like Kevin Hearn. So I think when you look at this now, he's going to let this play out. It's going to happen pretty quickly tomorrow, so we'll see where it goes.
And you voted against certifying the 2020 election. Do you regret that vote?
I don't. When you look at what I did, I said that Arizona and Pennsylvania should not have changed their voting laws without their state legislators being involved. If you look at since then, Pennsylvania's gone and changed a lot of those problems.
Did you talk to the former president about that when you guys talked yesterday?
I did not. He's looking forward as well. He knows he's in a great spot for this upcoming election, and he wants to talk about that.
Okay. One last thing. If you get the nomination, will you try to get the 217 votes you need before forcing a vote on the floor, or will you go to the floor like Jim Jordan did?
I think the consensus is, and I've talked to some of the other people that are running and others that are actually going to be the voting members, and we'd like to see a roll call vote in the basement so that we know this, because the American people don't want to see another thing that happened like last week with Jim Jordan.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time, Congressman Hearn. All right, Brianna, back to you. Congressman Hearn, one of the 9 members who are running, will he get the Republican nomination? A majority of the conference will vote behind closed doors on Tuesday. Floor vote, we'll see when that happens, and if whether or not Mr. Hearn or anybody else can get the 217 votes they need. Brianna?
Yes, we will be watching. Mani Raju live on the Hill. Thank you so much, and thank you to the Congressman as well. All right, let's turn to Harry Enton, because he's going to break this down for us. We really are at an extraordinary moment. Tell us just how extraordinary it is.
Yeah, so we're mid-session right now, right? And we've had 20 days since we've had a speaker. The old record mid-session was 2 back in 1820. So we are now 10 times the old record. This is pathetic, the fact that we cannot get a speaker. It's historically pathetic, and it's historically pathetic times 10.
We basically heard something. The congressman saying he doesn't want to go to the floor. So I think there's even this sort of admission in a way that what we see playing out on the floor is a little bit pathetic here. This is part of a larger trend of just Congress not getting work done.
That's exactly right. I mean, how many laws have been passed by this Congress and signed into law? We're talking less than 20. Less than 20. And if we go back over the last 50 years and we look at Congresses where you had, divided government, maybe the president was one party, Congress was at least partially run by another, the average to this point is nearly 100. So we're looking at about 1/5 the productivity of what the average Congress would be, even in divided government. So it's not necessarily too surprising that we haven't gotten a speaker, because this has been a historically unproductive Congress.
How are Americans looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, how are Americans looking at this? There was a great question asked by Quinnipiac University.
Harry, I'm so sorry. We're going to Detroit, where there is an update on the murder of this synagogue leader. Let's listen.
At her residence. We believe that there are no other groups or anyone else at risk in regards to this particular incident. We believe that this incident was not motivated by anti-Semitism, and that this suspect acted alone. Again, that is what we know at this time. There are several factors that has led us to this conclusion. We are not in a position to discuss all of them at this point. Obviously, there are parts of the investigation that we cannot get into. Again, it is germane to the closing of this case. There are certain factors that are only shared by the suspect and our investigators. So there are certain key points that we, again, will not be able to discuss. At this time, I'll bring up Deputy Chief Sloan to get into some of the areas that we can discuss with you. Deputy Chief Sloan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. Sadly, Miss Samantha Wall was found deceased in front of the 1300 block of Joliet Street on Saturday around 6:30 a.m. She was suffering from apparent stab wounds to her body. We are currently working with our partners, as the Chief mentioned, from the FBI and Michigan State Police to establish exactly what occurred in the hours and days prior to Miss Wall's death. At this point in the investigation, we are examining every piece of evidence we have uncovered to determine what exactly led to this incident, as well as following up on the extensive amounts of information that we have gained during our investigation. We have and are in the process of conducting countless interviews to learn everything about Miss Wall's life, including any possible motive or opportunity to harm her. What we do know, again, from what the Chief mentioned, is that Miss Wall did attend an event on Friday evening, which we know was a wedding. She did return home around 12:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, and we did discover no signs of forced entry to her residence. At some point between returning home from this event and in the early morning hours when she was discovered, Miss Wall was unfortunately fatally assaulted. By all accounts, Miss Wall was very well liked in the community, so it is clearly very shocking to her family and to her friends that this incident has occurred. I'd like to extend our gratitude to the men and women of the homicide section, our partner agencies, for the endless hours that they have dedicated to this investigation. We are committed to our continued work with our partners to identify the person responsible in this incident. Again, the investigation is ongoing, and we continue to ask for the community's assistance in solving this crime, either through 1-800-SPEAK-UP or Rewards TV. Thank you.
FBI. Sir.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. My name is Chevalier Gibson. That's spelled C-H-E-Y. V as in Victor, O-R-Y-E-A. Last name Gibson with a B. I'm the special agent in charge here in Detroit for the FBI, which covers the entire state of Michigan. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and thank you, Chief, for this opportunity. I want to express my sincerest condolences to Mrs. Wall's family, her friends, and the community during this tragic loss. As stated by Chief White, we are providing technical, forensic, and investigative support during this DP investigation. And I will say, if you have any questions with regard to the investigation or any facts thereof, I'm going to defer to Chief White at this time. And again, thank you guys for being here, and thank you, Chief White.
Again, I just want to assure the community that everything possible is being done to bring this case to a close. I ask for patience. There's a lot of evidence and information that has to be analyzed. Again, we're very thankful to our partnerships with both the FBI and the Michigan State Police. Access to crime lab activity and things such as that helps move this case along quite quickly. But we want to make sure that we don't rush and that we do everything to make sure that evidence is analyzed, search warrants are got up, and we bring this matter to close with the appropriate person being held accountable for these horrendous actions. With that, I'll take any questions.
Hi, Chief Ryan Marshall, representing WWJ News Radio 950 here locally, CBS News, New York, nationally. Even though you did say that there isn't any anti-Semitic motive here, how I would say, how concerned are you that having this happen on Saturday and now you guys coming on Monday, that maybe somebody that hasn't seen this would say, hey, we need to have some sort of retaliation given what's happening with Israel and Hamas?
Yeah, I mean, we're always concerned with retaliation on any homicide, and certainly the international situation that we find ourselves in now bring us additional concern. But our goal is to be transparent with the community, be transparent as to where we are, to alleviate concerns that those may have, that others are at risk. Based on what we know today, right now, with the information that we've received and uncovered over the past few hours, and certainly at the onset of this investigation, we are confident with our position where we are right now today.
And second question is, given that that isn't the motive, can you speak to anything that could have been involved in why she was killed or murdered, a motive? Can you speak to anything in that regard?
Yeah, as I indicated, and we certainly want to alleviate concerns. We certainly want to let others all know that we are actively investigating this and that we have not discovered anyone else to be at risk. But in that, we have to be very, very cautious as to what information we share. There are some very intricate details about this case that, if revealed, could really damage what we're trying to accomplish. There are some facts that are known only to our suspect, so I can't get into causation right now, or what he or she may feel was that, but more to come on that at a later date. Right now, what we want to do is get every bit of information we can clarified, analyzed, the evidence that we have analyzed, so that we can put more information out to the community to help us identify and bring the suspect to justice.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief White, my name is Alex Brichet from ABC News. Thank you for taking our questions. You've mentioned suspect a couple of times, so I'm just curious, do you have a suspect or suspects here?
So in the process of an investigation, the detectives, they work a number of different theories. We are working through what we have identified are some persons of interest, and we're very confident on the track that we're on. But we're early. We're very, very early in this investigation. And once they're done with that level, each area of the work requires specific investment of time, concentration, and development on its own. And so, to answer your question, the short answer is we have a number of people that give us interest. We are just short of calling one of the people a suspect, but we are working to that end, and we will be there. But it just takes time, and again, I'm asking for patience as we work through every aspect of what we're doing. There's a lot of information to be analyzed. Investigators have worked literally nonstop since we received this case. And I'm confident in the hard-working men and women of the Detroit Police Department. They are really, really good at what they do. I just got to give them time to do it, and we're going to get there. So yes, we are confident that we're going to develop a suspect. We're not there right now as of this press conference.
I understand. My second question for you, sir, is can you give any clarity or any theory as to how Miss Wall ended up outside of her house? That trail of blood that led to the sidewalk.
Yeah, and we've worked on that, and the detectives have worked on that, and we're working right now with, I will say that some of what I'm going to say is somewhat graphic, well, very graphic, and again, my heart goes out to the family who may be hearing this and not be easy for them to hear. But we are working with Michigan State Police and the FBI on blood splatter experts that will determine certain things about the event. What we believe to have happened is after she was attacked inside the home, she stumbled outside and collapsed in the yard. So that's where the blood trail appears to lead us, and we're pretty confident with that assessment. But we're going to confirm that through forensics and experts in that field.
Thank you.
Hi, Chief. Jesse Kirchner with NBC News. Appreciate you doing this. You mentioned that she left the wedding around 12:30 in the morning and she was attacked inside the home. We've heard from sources that she did not have any defensive wounds. Did she leave this wedding alone?
Yeah, I can't get into that. And your sources, I'm not going to confirm or deny that at this time. Again, a lot of, what sources don't take into account is how it could damage a case. And so I can't confirm or deny that. That's a very key part of our investigation that we're looking into.
Okay, and just point of clarification for my second question here, that you said persons of interest, so no one is in custody at this point. So,
no one is in custody.
So if no one's in custody, and you said people, you don't believe anyone else is at risk here, and you stressed that you don't believe this was tied to anti-Semitism, but obviously people have jumped to those conclusions, and you've got someone still out there who you say is responsible for this. So what do you say to people who are still worried about their safety in the climate of what's going on in the world right now, and it's particularly Jewish, Muslim, and Arab communities? What would you want people to know about their safety if they are jumping to conclusions?
Yeah, and so we certainly don't want folks to jump to a conclusion, but we certainly understand how one could arrive at those conclusions absent any information to the contrary, and that's why we're here today providing information on this particular case. We don't feel, as of this press conference, that there's anything that supports anyone else being at risk as it relates to a hate crime. We certainly know that this is a dangerous person, and this is why we're working tirelessly to identify a suspect and get the right suspect off the street. And once we get that development done, we will immediately push that out to our media partners as well as to our community partners to help us identify and bring this person to justice. Beyond that, we're going to continue to work hard and continue to push out transparent information so that the community is aware.
Good afternoon, Chief. Malachi Bear from Bruce, Detroit.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering, I mean, it seems as though the cause of death has been pretty well established as stabbing at this point, but I'm wondering if an autopsy has been completed and if you're able to tell us how many times she was stabbed or, anything else about the cause of death.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a rerun from me, and I apologize. I know you have a job to do, and I hope you appreciate we do too. That number is important for us to keep close. It could be the one piece of evidence that breaks the case open if we're talking to the right suspect that would know that, no one else but the police does. So right now we're not going to release that information. And the autopsy, yes, an autopsy was completed. I don't think we have the results yet, do we, DC? Oh, okay, we do have the post now, but I can't release any information on it.
Okay. And I know the timeline is still being put together, but I'm wondering how long she was potentially on the sidewalk or outside her home.
Yeah, and and I'm prefacing my comments again, I could only imagine the heartbreak that the family's hearing every time I open my mouth about this case. We're confident that she was there quite a while. We're working through our video assets in the area and a number of other things that we're going through right now with neighbors and all of the digital doorbell systems and things such as that to identify when she was seen last physically outside of the residence and how long she may have been there. And it's a lot to go through. We're doing search warrants on Ring doorbells and things like that right now in the area, and so but we're confident that she was there quite a while.
That kind of leads to my last question. I was curious if I saw that there were Ring doorbell cameras that I'm sure you can use to help identify suspects. I'm also wondering if there were green light cameras in the area. The condo neighborhood itself seems to be pretty self-contained, but has that helped you identify potential suspects you're looking into, persons of interest?
Yeah, so as you know, one of the provisions of the green light is that there's no facing of residential communities. That was a concern early on. I think you may have been part of some of the conversation around that. But as it relates to routes of travel, they could certainly be useful. We just have to get there once we figure all of that out. We'll certainly be looking at green lights and other video systems to see routes of travel. One of the things that's of particular interest to us is when she left the wedding, does a vehicle appear with her in more than one stop, right? So we'll be tracking her entire route digitally that she took from the wedding to see if anyone was following her. And if you see the same vehicle in two different places near her, that would be of a concern and an issue for us.
And where was the wedding?
We won't do that.
Sorry.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Omar Jimenez, CNN. Thank you for taking the time. I know you.
I'm sorry, who are you?
Omar Jimenez, CNN.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you said that At this point, you haven't seen any indications that this would be any form of anti-Semitism. I guess my further clarification and question is, if you don't have a suspect identified and you haven't shared what led up to this killing, what makes you so confident that this isn't? Essentially, have you ruled it out despite not having found it just yet?
Well, you know, when we look at the case, there's certain tracks that these types of cases take. When we talk about hate crimes, you know, there's certain tracks that they take, and we have looked at this particular track, and we're confident with the information that we have right now that this is not what we have right now. But this is, you know, a 2-day investigation that is ongoing. But you know, we were very cautious in making that declaration too early. We did a lot of work that gave us the confidence that we have now, that it's not as we stand here right now. We are working, you know, we're not ruling out anything. Okay, let me be clear. We're looking at every aspect of this case, and we're going to go where the information and the evidence takes us. And right now, the evidence does not take us there. We do have another working theory that we're looking at, and where the evidence has taken us to, and we're going to exhaust that. And then if we get there and it takes us somewhere else, we're going to exhaust that, and we may be back here having a different conversation. But as of this press conference, we are confident with what we've seen and what we are saying.
And my other question was, I know you're looking at a variety of a number of people of interest at this point. No one's gotten to that suspect level. Is it your impression, at least among the people of interest that you have, that this is someone that may have been known to her, or are we talking about someone that, you know, may have come in from out of town or whatever it may be?
We have not exhausted anyone as a suspect. Anyone. We are confident we're on the right track, but I'm not prepared to tell you the relationship between her and the suspect as of yet. I think it would be irresponsible at this point. We've got to give the investigators more time to detail out their investigation and pull evidence, and we will be back here to update the case. But right now, I think it would be irresponsible for me to say that.
Hey there, Reuven Fenton with the New York Post. Hello.
Hello.
Just to continue on what you were just saying, and you said, you know, you're not ready to speak about the relationship. I assume, do you also mean or lack thereof? In other words, is it also possible? You're not saying whether they knew each other or not.
Exactly. I'm not confirming or denying what the investigation has revealed thus far.
A minute ago, you spoke about, you know, you have a theory you're going with right now. I mean, is there in regards to that theory, in terms of motive, well, maybe this is a kind of a moot point because you can't really speak on it, but I mean, can you elaborate at all about the nature of the motive, if you know what I mean? Is it a motive pertaining to a desire one person had over another, and you know, I don't know. Is there anything you can say about this working theory?
Yeah, and I know where you're going.
Yeah.
And when I say theory, I don't want to characterize it as a cavalier assessment of information. I mean, it's beyond a theory. But what the investigators do is they look at the evidence, they look at all the evidence and a number of different things that we're not going to discuss today, and they begin to go down certain paths as to what is likely to occur, what possibly occurred throughout a course of events. And it starts with literally investigating every aspect of who she's been in contact with, her course of travel, who she interacted with, who was the last person she talked to, and all the way back, and develop suspects. And so in the course of doing that, you know, you look at certain things such as, was this a home invasion? Okay, and then you either make the determination that it either was not, or maybe. What we have certainty with is that it wasn't, right? So now you start to shape the course of your theory. Then you look at, was this a hate crime? Then again, you use that same, you know, 3-step method. Is it possible? Is it yes? Is it no? And if so, what areas would you be looking for? And these are experts that do this. And we're confident that we have any indication at this point that that's the case. And then we go down the list of many, many, many things, from relationships to friendships to, you know, you name it. We don't rule out anybody without verification that they're not a suspect, and that includes neighbors and everyone, you know. And so that's where they're at right now. But as you do that, you build out a theory as to possibly what happened. But it's a very deliberate process. It's not you know, something that's done in a vacuum. These are trained expert investigators working with the FBI, the Michigan State Police, and our other federal partners to ensure that we look at everything. So that's where we're at. I know where you're trying to get me to go, but as I indicated, I can't get there.
And I see on the stripes on your arm, you've been a cop for a long time. I mean, have you ever, in terms of what you've seen over the many years you've been doing this, I mean, how brutal was this, and then the scope of things that you've experienced and you've seen? I mean, have you ever seen anything like this before?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen similar things. You know, anytime that you have a loss of life in our community, it's a tragic day for us. And certainly when you hear about her contribution to the community, to society, and the great loss, and all the people that she's helped, and literally everyone that I have heard from, and it's been a lot of people, they start the conversation all the same, how wonderful of a person she was. So that's a great loss to our community and to our city.
Hey, Chief, Victor Williams of Local 4. You have a lot of people living on Joliet Place who may still feel unsafe with the killer out there still. What would you say to them first off?
Well, I've said it. You know, I don't feel that they're at risk, but if they saw anything, no matter how small they may think it is, if they saw someone that's not known to the neighborhood, may have been there earlier in the week, if they saw anyone lurking around the area, certainly let us know. Any small moniker of information could be the break we're looking for in this case. Check your video cameras on your home. Share all the information that you have with us. Anything small or large, please make sure you share it with us.
And can you at all reveal the location of that wedding at all?
I'm sure it'll be out. I'm not going to be the one that gives it. You know, someone just got married and want to separate the two. You know, the only connection it has is that she was there, and we will be talking to folks about that in very near future. Thanks.
Jeremy Edwards with ABC News. Just wanted to see if you could speak to if she had her cell phone on her, any forms of ID.
She had her cell phone with her. I don't know if she had it on the scene. Yeah, both.
And the person of interest that you have been working with and talking with, have they been cooperating with the investigation?
Well, as I said, we haven't disqualified anybody yet. There are a number of people that we're interested in. We have not zeroed in on one person of interest. We have a number of people that we're talking to. And as I understand it, and everybody we've talked to has been somewhat cooperative. We haven't heard that they're uncooperative, let me say that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, Rebecca Rosenberg with Fox News Digital. So, I'm just wondering, you said you're working through multiple suspects. If you don't have a key suspect in mind yet, how are you able to exclude, for instance, a hate crime motive or anti-Semitism?
So, if I misspoke, what I said was a number of persons of interest. If I called them suspect, I may have misspoke. And as I indicated earlier, there's a process to how we disqualify suspects, how we disqualify persons of interest that the detectives are engaged in. And certainly, as I talked about the steps we go through in identifying any crime, we're confident with where we've arrived with this particular crime. We believe that the motivation is very different than a hate crime. It's horrific and it's tragic. And that's the focus of the investigation. But if something leads us down that path again, or if something comes up, we will certainly be engaging our federal partners and looking at that. We're not saying, as we stand here today, that if we were to arrive at a space where that becomes something that we need to look at again, that we wouldn't. We're just saying that as we stand here today, right now, that doesn't appear to be the motivation.
And just another question, unrelated question. There was a couple near the crime scene whose car tires were slashed over the weekend. They had left town on Friday, returned Sunday, and it was an older couple. Both their driver's side tires were slashed. They said they alerted gear.
All right, I want to get now to Caitlin Collins and Alex Marquardt. They have some very essential reporting we need to get to. Alex, sources telling us 2 more hostages have been released by Hamas. What can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. My colleagues Caitlin Collins, Jenny Hansler, and I are hearing that 2 more hostages have been released from Hamas custody. Of course, this comes after Judith and Natalie Renan were released by Hamas on Friday. We understand they are Israeli citizens, but they could also be dual nationals. It is unclear what the identities of these 2 prisoners are. Hamas had indicated over the weekend that they were willing to release 2 prisoners and follow the same format that they had on Friday, which is essentially handing hostages over to the Red Cross, which operates independently in Gaza, and then they would then be handed over to the Israelis. So we understand from one source that these 2 Israelis are now with the Red Cross. They have not yet been handed over to the Israelis, and of course this comes as part of this ongoing effort that is led primarily by Qatar as well as Egypt to engage with Hamas to get these prisoners out of Hamas detention. The IDF earlier today put a much more a finer point, a more specific number on the number of hostages in their custody, 222 of all kinds of nationalities. We did hear from the White House earlier today saying that there's still some 10 Americans unaccounted for in the wake of these Hamas attacks, and around a handful, according to the White House's John Kirby, are believed to be Hamas hostages. Brianna.
And Caitlin, so it sounds like there are some details. We don't know if they are dual nationals necessarily, and obviously we are awaiting details about their identities.
Right, that is something that we're still trying to confirm. We do have 2 names. Of course, we are still running those down. This is extremely sensitive information for obvious reasons, and so we want to be very careful with this and double check all of this before this information is released. And that is a good question of whether or not they are dual citizens. Obviously, we had the 2 who were released last week, Natalie Renan and her mother Judith. They are expected to be back on their way to the U.S. really at any moment now. They were believing, her father said that they were going to be back in the United States as soon as tomorrow. And so what we're still trying to wait and glean information from, we should note this is a really fluid situation, because what I was hearing from one source is that these 2 hostages who are being released are not yet actually in the custody of the Israeli government. What we saw happen last week was these 2 hostages were brought to the border with Gaza, and then they were brought by IDF soldiers to a base in central Israel, and that's where they met up with their family members. And so that's the question here of how these hostages who have been released are being transported. We don't know yet what condition they're in health-wise. How are they doing medically? Last week, Hamas was claiming they released Judith Renan in part for humanitarian reasons, which I should note there was a lot of skepticism on that based on what Hamas has done over the last 2 weeks. But that is a question here of who these 2 hostages are, of course, why these 2 hostages. But I can tell you, I was just in Tel Aviv. We were surrounded by a lot of these families who have had their relatives abducted by Hamas, and this is huge and welcome news for them, regardless of how it came about. We do know part of this was because of some mediating done by the Qataris and the Egyptians, something that we know had been a process here, Brianna, as it had been playing out, these quiet talks. And also this comes as the White House today was facing those questions about whether or not they had urged Israel to delay its ground invasion of Gaza in order to get more hostages out beforehand. So there's a lot of moving parts at play here right now, but obviously very good news for the families of these 2 hostages.
And Alex, it's so interesting, as Caitlin mentions, this sort of quiet negotiation between the Qataris and in this case Egyptians negotiating with Hamas. Quiet for sure. We're not finding out about it until hostages are being released. But I can't really even imagine how sort of feverish the pace of this is behind the scenes with all of the parties involved.
It certainly is intense. We heard Secretary Blinken over the weekend saying that they are working on this essentially every minute of the day. Of course, the United States does not talk directly to Hamas, which they consider a terrorist organization. So they essentially deputize the Qataris and the Egyptians who do have solid ties, lines of communication into Hamas to carry out these negotiations. I think what's interesting here, Brianna, is this is yet another 2 hostages coming in the wake of 2 other hostages. This does not necessarily play to Israel's advantage here. Israel, of course, wants all of the hostages out. Every country does. But at the same time, as Hamas indicates that they are willing to release hostages, the pressure on Israel has grown to delay their ground incursion of Gaza. Hamas has now shown that they are willing to release hostages. They are willing to engage. And so we now have reported that the United States has pressed Israel to slow their incursion into Gaza, to give it more time, because we have seen this progress on both the hostage release front as well as the aid going into Gaza. This is the second day in a row today that we have seen aid flowing into Gaza. Now, the U.S. has been very, very careful to not give the sense that they are telling Israel what to do. They're dictating terms. Israel certainly bristling at the notion that anybody might tell them how to carry out their war against Hamas. But certainly the Israelis and the U.S. are speaking very close, are talking about all kinds of things all the time, particularly these hostages. And so what we have understood is that there has been some pressure from the U.S. and others to allow for more time to get more hostages out, Brianna.
All right, Alex and Caitlin, if you could stand by for me. You've been with us on your reporting here that 2 more hostages have been released by Hamas. This is according to multiple sources who have told CNN this. We do not know their identities. We are told that by one Israeli official that they are not yet in Israel. It's a very sensitive situation. We're going to get in a quick break, and we'll get you more on this breaking news here in just a moment.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines. The day's biggest stories. The night's most essential reporting. This is the new CNN Prime Time. Weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
How long have you been tracking the value of our car? Should we sell it?
We hold.
Our low mileage is paying off. You think we should?
Hold.
Put them on.
Already sold the Carvana. Go to Carvana and track your car's value today.
I was a teacher for 30 years, and today I'm a grandmother of 9. Technology is essential to our everyday lives, and that's why I'm concerned about our foreign adversaries' influence over the internet. Our adversaries believe in censorship and control. That's not the future I want for my grandchildren or yours. Congress needs to protect our democratic values and strengthen, not weaken, American technology.
ADT Self-Setup, featuring Google Nest products. Now you can easily install your system that's backed by ADT's 24/7 monitoring with no long-term contracts. So you have a home with no worries. Brought to you by ADT.
There's 2 things a young man want to be. Cowboy or a gangster. And a gangster is out of style. I got back to my roots. We come from a long line of cowboys. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, my aunt even rode horses. When I see all of us out here on this ranch, I see how far our legacy can go.
Did you ever stress about us having 3 kids?
No. It was always part of the plan.
3 kids? This was never part of the plan. These kids order the lobster mac and cheese. What if she wants to play golf? We're gonna have to outlaw golf. Absolutely no golf in this house. Not under my roof.
Since we started working with Empower, all of our financial questions have been answered, so we don't have to worry.
So you never...
Nope, always part of the plan.
Join 18 million Americans who are taking control of their financial future and empower what's next. Get started today at empower.com. This is American infrastructure. Megawatts of power. Rails and open road. And essential services of every kind. All running on countless invisible networks, making it a prime target for cyber attacks. With the same AI-powered security that protects all of Google, also defends the systems running America's infrastructure. For these services, for the 336 million of us living here.
Discover the fine art of relaxation and rejuvenation.
2 more hostages being released by Hamas. A song by Paul Beckman, Paul the Rainbow Song. Oh. Sorry for the morning groaning. I'm experiencing agony and pain from diverticulitis. Two more hostages released by Hamas. 2 more. That makes 4 altogether. They haven't got them yet, but they're supposed to be released to the Red Cross. Whoa. That's probably why the USA is trying to caution Israel to hold off on its incursion a little while longer, so more hostages can be released, and so more humanitarian aid can be sent into the Gaza Strip to help those ailing who've been without food and water and fuel for so long now. Well, I know Israel wants to get into going into the Gaza Strip to get at Hamas. Well, all in due time, yes. I think everyone can do what they want to do, but it's good to have the hostages be released. Well, they should release them all at once and say, sorry about that. That's what Hamas should do. But they're not to be trusted. They're a terrorist group who has committed atrocities, the worst kind of murder. Well, what do I know? I only hear the reports from CNN and BBC News, but at least that's something. 2 more hostages being released. Whoa, yeah. I'm sure the families of hostages who have been taken, so many nationalities, they're all hopeful and positive that their own loved ones will be released too. Releasing 2 more hostages by Hamas. Let's tune in and see what they got to say here and learn more, shall we? By all means.
Where exactly they are now, and once they get into the custody of the IDF, which, Anderson, as you know, is what happened with those 2 hostages last week. They came to the Gaza border. They were then given over to the IDF, who brought them to a military base first in central Israel. That's where they greeted their parents before and having those medical checkups and obviously kind of debriefings of what they've been going through.
Yeah, and Alex, there's usually this interim step. They're handed, usually Hamas, wherever is holding them, hands them over to the representatives of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and then they make that transfer to IDF officials. These are 2, there were 2 that were nuns who we talked about last week. Let's talk about the timing of this. Clearly, Hamas has many captives in their custody. They could release all of them if they wanted to. They are releasing them 2 by 2. What does that tell you?
Well, it's certainly good news. No one's going to tell you otherwise, Anderson. This is fantastic for those families, as well as for the Ornans, who saw 2 of their family members come back on Friday. But no doubt, Anderson, whether it's the U.S. or Israel or Qatar, which is leading these negotiations along with Egypt, they would like to see much bigger numbers. I mean, we heard from the IDF earlier today that there are some 222 hostages who are in custody. We certainly don't want to see these hostages coming out two by two. The Qataris are now pushing for much bigger numbers, say dozens or scores of the civilians, of the foreigners who are still in custody. In terms of the mechanics, Anderson, obviously Hamas is not going to come face to face with Israeli officials as they hand over prisoners. So you have the UN, which operates independently inside Gaza. You have the Red Cross, which operates fairly independently inside Gaza. And so what has happened today, we understand, as like it did on Friday, the same mechanism of Hamas handing these two captives over to the Red Cross. They will then be taken to somewhere along the border. We don't know where. There are two formal large border crossings in southern Gaza. One goes into Egypt, one goes into Israel. But frankly, there are a number of places all along that fence line where you are seeing today all of those Israeli troops, where the Red Cross could then hand those two Israeli women over to the IDF. As Caitlin mentioned, they would then likely be taken to a military base. They would get checked up to make sure that they're okay. Hamas has claimed that the previous release was for humanitarian reasons. It's not clear what shape the Hanan women are in. But we do understand from the White House today that the U.S. officials have debriefed or are going to debrief the two Americans to gather intelligence, to get a sense of where they were held, how they were held, and any other kind of information that they could glean from those two women. But Anderson, certainly the bottom line here is that everyone wants to see a lot more hostages being released, and that is why there is this pressure on the Israeli government to delay their incursion into Gaza. Anderson.
Yeah, and the International Committee of the Red Cross has repeatedly requested access to all the hostages who remain in Gaza. They have not been allowed access. They've also requested proof of life. Last we heard they had not received any of that from those holding them, Islamic Jihad or Hamas. Alex, Caitlin will check in with you shortly. Kurt Volker, the former U.S. ambassador to NATO and former U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations, he joins me now. Ambassador Volker, there's a lot we do know, which we are not saying at this moment. We're waiting to see these two former hostages in Israeli custody. What are your thoughts on hearing this news?
Well, I think that this is a very difficult situation for Israel. The longer this goes on, and this is clearly Hamas's strategy, is to drag this out, just a trickle of hostages here and there, harder for Israel to go ahead with a full-scale invasion, and that means that time goes by and increasingly public opinion is trending against Israel in many countries around the world. So this is a Hamas tactic from the beginning, taking the hostages as a way to try to hold off an Israeli full-scale assault.
Well, one of the things that Hamas has said in the last couple of days is that some of these hostages may be being held by other groups, whether it's Islamic Jihad, which early on had claimed to hold about 30, or even individual families or sort of mob organizations in Gaza may have crossed over during the terror attacks and stolen people, that they have seen that in the past. And Hamas had said that they want to locate where all of them may be and account for them all. Whether that's true or not is unclear, but certainly Israeli officials have said that in past experiences there have been individuals or families or other groups which have taken hostages, and then they're sort of moved up the chain ultimately to a group like Hamas. Hamas, though, could release all the hostages that they have. There's nothing stopping them.
That's right. They took these hostages on purpose, and I think it suits Hamas's purposes for these hostages to be distributed. Then they can say, oh, well, we don't even control all of them. We're working on it. We need time. It's all part of a positioning of Hamas to try to keep the Israelis from launching that full-scale assault anytime soon. And I think that it could be both ways. It could be that, yes, there were individuals or other groups that also took advantage of the mayhem to go kidnap a few people, see if they can get some ransom or some payment from a higher-level Palestinian terrorist organization. But it also could be that Hamas did this and then distributed these hostages in order to create the very conditions where they can then claim, well, we can't even get them all right now, we have to work on it.
Ambassador Kurt Volker, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
Joining us now is Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces. Colonel Conricus, what can you say about this news?
Yes, I don't have official IDF confirmation. I see Israeli reports and other reports out there. And as soon as we will have hands-on, then the IDF will issue an official confirmation of the situation. Of course, happy or better news. We want, of course, all of those held hostage, the women, the children, the babies, the men, the soldiers, all of them released, and not just the two that have been released now.
In terms of how the handover process goes on the Israeli side, can you talk about that in past exchanges?
Yeah, I mean, there's a designated lead here, a former IDF brigadier general who is in charge of the whole mechanism at the national level, coordinating efforts between different Israeli offices and institutions. He and his people are represented on the ground at the handover, where the former hostages are handed over to Israel, usually by an intermediary. Last time it was the Red Cross. We'll see who it is this time. I suppose it will be the same. And once they are in Israeli hands, they are brought back to an IDF base to make sure that, for medical and psychological evaluations, to be reunited with their family, and for additional interviews and understanding of their situation.
In terms of the operation itself, the potential for a ground operation, how does this trickle of hostages being released, how does that affect military planning?
Everything affects, but I think that we can see through the very obvious efforts that Hamas is doing, probably trying to play for time and play for legitimacy, using extremely cynically the hostages, the civilian and military hostages that they've taken. We see through that, and we demand all of the hostages back. We are ready to maneuver. We are ready, and every minute that goes by, we are more ready. More preparations, more practice, and better honing of all of the capabilities. So every minute that goes by is not necessarily a minute that is in the best intention of Hamas.
Do you have information about, has the Red Cross been able to, I mean, last I heard the Red Cross was not able to get proof of life of any of these hostages. They haven't been able to visit these hostages.
Yeah, I know of requests that have been made, but as of now, I do not have any information of actual meetings, which is what the Red Cross is supposed to do under its convention and what we all accept from it. But we've seen that in the past. We saw it with Gilad Shalit and other Israelis that were held hostage. Hamas doesn't allow anything that is in accordance with humanitarian international law. No visits, no verification of anything. I'll remind everybody watching that there's still two bodies of dead Israeli soldiers that have been in Hamas, they've been held by Hamas for many, many years. That we have been asking, of course, for the international cross to access and to get anything from, so far without anything substantial. But if we bring focus back to what's happening now, very cynical practice by Hamas, one that we are able to see through. We're happy to see people released, but from our perspective, all of them should be home, and they should be home quickly. And these practices are very clear what Hamas is trying to do, cynically using hostages to play for time.
In a kibbutz like near Oz, where we saw Hamas come and brutally slaughter people, there were also large numbers of other men, even some young kids, who had crossed over from Gaza in their wake, some of them armed, some of them not, looting. Is it believed that some hostages have been taken by other actors in this, whether it's not Hamas, not Islamic Jihad, but opportunists or criminal gangs? Is that, I mean, in the past, have you seen that?
Well, in the past, no. As far as I recollect, we've never faced a situation like this. And yes, I am aware of those reports, and I've seen the video footage. Our perspective on this is that they are all Hamas responsibility. Hamas bears full accountability and responsibility for the actions, for the atrocities of October 7th, for crossing into Israel, for butchering and raping and maiming and murdering and burning people alive. All of that is on Hamas. They will pay the full price for it. They will be dismantled. And whether or not our people were taken initially by young, enthusiastic and bloodthirsty Palestinians that are not necessarily members of Hamas, less important. They are all under the responsibility of Hamas.
And in terms of the movement of people that you have been tracking from the north of Gaza down south, as we know, hundreds of thousands of people have made that trek. Well, families have moved down. Do you believe currently, and I think we spoke about this a little bit yesterday, that Hamas operatives have also moved further south?
They may have, which is part of what we assessed would happen, part of the risk assessment. We understand that Hamas has that tendency, like all other terrorists, whenever they face real fighters and not grandmothers and babies in shelters, but when they face real fighters, they have that tendency to flee, either hide underground in tunnels or try to look like a civilian and flee down south using the safety of those civilians. We calculated that in, and we still advertise our intentions because we want the Gazan civilians away from what is going to be a very high intensity combat area. So that's a risk we take. We will get our hands on those Hamas terrorists as well. We're hunting them, and we have had quite a lot of successes lately of the last days with tactical commanders. We have a special task force that is interrogating many of those so-called elite Hamas forces, Nukhba. Many of them were apprehended in Israel. They are being interrogated by the ISA, and the live intelligence that is extracted is helping us in targeting the whereabouts of those that were able to get back to Gaza, and that has led to quite a lot of successful strikes on their whereabouts. We continue with that. None of them will end this war alive.